On January 7th, 2025, at around 10:30 in the morning, a fire broke out in the coastal community of the Pacific Palisades just north of Los Angeles, California. 24 hours later, the neighborhood of almost 23,000 people was basically completely wiped off the map, and a monumental firestorm erupted, engulfing and surrounding Los Angeles in flames. So what happened, what's happening, and what's going to happen next? My name is Alexander Ayling, and while I'm not a Palisades resident, my family has a long history in the community. My grandparents moved to the Pacific Palisades in the 1950s. They raised my mom and her 3 siblings in the Palisades. They all went to Pali High, and we continue to have a relationship and a connection to the community in the Pacific Palisades. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, you're probably wondering why I'm making a video about this. This is definitely not the type of content that I usually create, but this is something that hits really close to home. It's something that I think is important, and if you're just gonna watch right now and you're thinking about maybe leaving, stop. Please donate to the Los Angeles Fire Department Foundation. I will have a link in the description of this video. Click on it. This video is a fundraiser for the LAFD Foundation. We need to support our firefighters, the firefighters who are on the front lines battling these fires all across Los Angeles. Please join me in making a donation, and you can do that by clicking the link in this video. My grandparents moved to the Palisades in the 50s. My mom and her whole family grew up in Pali. Palisades was where we all went, our extended family, to gather and to celebrate all of the holidays, and it's basically like the nexus of our family. Seeing the images of the devastation of this fire is just unbelievable. It's truly staggering how catastrophic these fires were for this community. My grandmother passed away in February of 2024. My grandfather passed away in 2018 in August. And I was a Los Angelino for quite a while. I think 7 or 8 years I lived in LA. I would go and visit my grandma whenever I could, especially after my grandfather passed. And I can't tell you how many times she would tell me how worried she was about a massive fire breaking out in the Palisades. And she was a little bit of a worrier, so I would always tell her, oh, don't worry, everything will be fine. It's okay, it's not gonna happen. But it does seem like her worst fears came true. Unfortunately, I'm just glad she wasn't here to see the destruction of this community that she loved so much, that meant so much to her and to her whole life. It's a tragedy. So if you were affected, if you are being affected by the Palisades fire or the Eaton fire, or any of these fires in Los Angeles, I feel for you. My heart goes out to you. My prayers go to you. And I'm praying for a speedy extinguishing of these fires and some questions to be answered, because I think seeing the aftermath of the devastation, a lot of questions are being asked. Good questions are being asked, how this situation was able to unfold the way that it was. Firefighters running out of water, people in positions of power dodging responsibility. Current Mayor Karen Bass, who was actually outside of the country when the fires broke out, here's her arrival back into the US from a trip overseas to Ghana.
Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that? Have you no response to that? Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? And do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today?
So we'll talk about all that stuff towards the end of the video. I think it's important first just to give context. If you're not from the community, if you're not from Los Angeles, a little bit about the Palisades and its history with fires, because this is not something that's anomalous. Fires have happened in the past. So let's talk about that. The Pacific Palisades is located at the base of the Santa Monica Mountains, just north of Santa Monica and south of Topanga and Malibu. It's surrounded on one side by the Santa Monica mountain range, and in front you have the Pacific Ocean. It's a beautiful coastal community. It's kind of an anomaly in LA because it has a small town feel, and it's a family community. It's very close-knit. A lot of the people who've lived there have lived there for generations. It's kind of this beautiful hidden gem in LA. The Santa Monica mountain range spans 40 miles or 64 kilometers, about 500 square miles or 1,300 square kilometers. And the mountain range itself is made up of coastal chaparral, shrubs, oak forests, willows and cottonwoods in the streams. There's a reason people choose to live here. It has a Mediterranean climate. It's gorgeous. But at the same time, it does have a tendency to become very dry. And this past year has not been a lot of rain. There's been very little significant rainfall for many months. And that leaves that mountain range in a prime state for a massive fire. But first, a little bit of history of fires in the region. The biggest fire before this one was in 1978. It was called the Mandeville Canyon Fire. May 24th, 1978, the Mandeville Canyon Fire burned 20,000 acres and destroyed over 200 homes, making it one of the region's most destructive fires up until now. That fire was definitely burned into the memory of my grandmother. She talked about it a lot, and she was always worried about something like that happening again. Then in 2018, the Woolsey fire burned around 96,000 acres. That was started by utility equipment failure, power lines near Simi Valley, and then spreading towards Malibu and parts of the Palisades, causing evacuations. 1,600 structures burned and 3 deaths. In 2019, there was the Getty Fire, also caused by electrical lines and high winds. And in 2021, the Palisades Fire burnt around 1,200 acres in the Palisades Highland area, and that was caused by an arsonist. While it's too early to know exactly how the fire began, there are a lot of different theories floating around online, and I think it's a little bit too early to jump to any conclusions. There are fire investigators currently investigating the beginning of this fire. So we don't know whether it was caused by potentially an older fire, which was extinguished around New Year's, caused by fireworks that was extinguished like a week earlier. Fires can lay dormant, embers can lay dormant, and then when the right weather conditions come up, they can reignite. It could have been caused by any number of factors, so it's a little bit too early to figure out exactly who or how the fire started. What I think is most important to understand is Santa Ana winds. The Santa Ana winds are a seasonal weather event. Most of the interior of California and the Southwest in general is dry desert. And so these winds, dry, warm, strong winds, come rushing across the Southwest from as far away as Utah, and they come over and blow out towards the ocean. When there's not a fire, Santa Anas are great, especially if you're a surfer. It causes offshore winds, and it can be a nice thing.
Yeah, Santa Anas.
But recently, the Santa Anas have been associated with fire events.
The Santa Anas, the night wind.
And this was no different. Last week, at the beginning of the year, the National Weather Service issued red flag warnings on the morning of Monday, January 6th. And, firefighters and the LA Department of Water and Power were ready, supposedly, for these winds and for the potential of a fire to break out. So here's a timeline of events as we know it currently. And this could change if you're watching the video later on, but this is what we know now. 10:24 a.m., January 7th, 2025, smoke of the fire at Temescal Ridge Trail in the Santa Monica Mountains is spotted first by the University of California, San Diego's Alert California camera network. The fire was estimated at 10 acres or 4 hectares. Just 25 minutes later, the fire grows to over 200 acres or 81 hectares. So it literally explodes. It gets so much bigger so fast. I used to go hiking up on Temescal Ridge. It's a beautiful area, a wonderful hike, but it's dry and it's heavily brushed, and a fire breaking out there obviously was very bad. By 2:10 in the afternoon on January 7th, the fire had grown to 700 acres. There were 200 firefighters on duty at that time. Winds are gusting 35 to 55 miles an hour. By 3:10 p.m., the fire grew to 1,200 acres, and some buildings are destroyed. By 5:30 in the afternoon, Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, declares a state of emergency. By 10:45 p.m., the Los Angeles Fire Department continued air operations. So when fires like this break out, they usually have helicopters and airplanes ready to drop fire retardants and water to try to contain the fire to stop its spread. But because of the high winds, those airplanes and helicopters were grounded. Nearly 1 million people in LA are without power. Basically that night, they order a mandatory curfew. Throughout the next morning, the fire just continues to expand and expand. It's at 20,000 acres by 9 in the morning the next day. The first fatality is discovered on January 9th. The California National Guard is deployed on January 9th to stop looters. People have been arrested already on suspicion of looting or the intent to loot. And fires have broken out all across Los Angeles. At one point, there were 7 active fires. None of these fires, the major fires, the Palisades Fire or the Eaton Fire, are currently contained. And right now, Los Angeles is bracing for even more extreme winds. On that first night, winds broke 100 miles an hour and were blowing embers from house to house to house. The next morning, when people woke up and tried to have a look at their properties, the entire neighborhood was pretty much gone. And the images sent to me by family and friends are staggering. The loss, it's completely unrecognizable. Block after block after block of houses are gone. So this right now is shaping up to be one of the worst, if not the worst, fire national disaster in California's history. Yeah, as the ashes settle, there's been a lot of dialogue online about preparedness and mistakes made by the people in power. What went wrong? Because at about 3 in the morning on the first night, the fire hydrants went dry. The firefighters were not able to fight the fires with water from the fire hydrants. Los Angeles is in a unique position because it gets most of its water from outside of the city. 3/4 of the water, I believe, comes from quite far away. As far away as the Colorado River. There's a very big, complicated system of water management, but one of the main issues showing up is that a major reservoir in the Palisades, known as the Ynez Reservoir, which is capable of holding 1.7 million gallons of water, was offline. It had been offline for nearly a year leading up to this due to a tear in the fabric of a protective layer over the reservoir. Look, I don't want to point fingers and get too involved in the back and forth of public policy and politics, but it is definitely disheartening to know that the CEO of LA Department of Water and Power, her name is Janisse Quiñones. She earns an annual salary of $750,000 US. It's almost twice as much as the president of the United States makes. The chief of the fire department's coming out, showing letters that she sent to LADWP saying, we know of faulty fire hydrants in the Palisades, and there's been budget cuts proposed by current mayor Karen Bass, who was actually outside of the country when the fires broke out. Obviously, having that extra water in the reservoir would have been helpful. There's experts coming in saying it would not have been able to contain these fires. The reservoir system, fire hydrants, they are not designed to combat a firestorm on this scale. They're designed to extinguish a couple of houses maximum. Obviously, this is much larger than that, but still, having that water available would have been great. Does it take over a year to fix a minor tear and get that water back into the reservoir? Probably not. Emptying the reservoir began in February after a tear in the floating cover, measuring several feet, allowed debris, bird droppings, and other objects to enter the water supply. So the DWP drained that site to avoid contamination and comply with water regulations. DWP sought bids for the repair in April of 2024 at a cost of up to $89,000. In November, the utility signed off on a contract with a lakeside firm for about $130,000, records show. The status of repairs is unclear. DWP's employee union leader condemned the months-long wait to restore the reservoir. Governor Gavin Newsom has issued an independent investigation into LADWP's handling of the fire, including loss of water pressure, empty hydrants, and the emptying of the Ynez Reservoir, calling it deeply troubling. Look, obviously water management is complicated, especially in LA, but there's also, it seems, a level of mismanagement that's coming to light. And then when you look at the salary of the CEO of LADWP, it's quite concerning, especially when there's budget cuts to actual firefighters and the fire department, and people like her are being paid exorbitant sums of money. There's a disconnect there that is really troubling. Here's a clip of the LA Fire Chief talking about recent budget cuts and how those hindered their ability to respond to this fire.
Is it true? Did those decisions hurt your ability to do so?
Yes, we took a $17 million budget cut. We know any budget cut would negatively impact our ability to carry out our mission.
So obviously a lot of issues are coming to light in the aftermath of these fires, but I should reiterate, these fires are still burning. They're only 10 or 15% contained at the time of recording this video. So once again, I'm asking you, please join me in donating to the LAFD Foundation, the Los Angeles Fire Department Foundation. This money is going to go directly to helping firefighters on the front line and help get these fires extinguished. The neighborhood of the Pacific Palisades has been utterly destroyed. Over 5,000 homes lost, huge areas, neighborhoods gone, block after block after block. Our neighbors, my mom's best friend from childhood, who she's still best friends with, they lost their home, and it's really disheartening. We found out that my grandparents' home survived the fires. The house right next door to it did not, and all the other houses on the block did not, except for one house and my grandparents' house. The garage and the shed were burnt, but somehow miraculously the house did not burn down, and we are immensely grateful for that luck because the house was full of their possessions, photographs, memories from my deceased grandparents. But I know so many people have lost everything and don't even have those memories. So if you've been affected by these fires, my heart goes out to you. Once again, I'm pleading with you all to please donate to help contain and stop these fires. If you have the ability to donate anything, please click on the link in this video and donate today. And we'll check in on the status of this once the ashes truly settle. In the meantime, if you're in LA, if you're affected by these fires, my heart goes out to you. I'm sending love, I'm sending prayers, and we'll catch you in another video soon. Peace.